for the past 6 years from Srimati Matandi Shankar and Vidwan Shri B.U. Ganesh Prasad. She is currently a student of Vidushi Kruti Vittal. She has always been interested in Indian and world philosophies and wants to continue exploring its intersection with music and art. Niyantri's presentation today delves into the role of Vedanta in the origin and development of Indian classical music, with a focus on Carnatic music and a quick look at Hindustani music. Niyantri will be diving into the various nuances and expressions of Dvaita from Shri Madhvacharya, Vishishta Dvaita from Saint Ramanujacharya, and Advaita from Adi Shankaracharya, the philosophies as they're expressed in musical terms by the various composers, and the way Indian philosophy itself has influenced the formation of Carnatic and Hindustani music. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, okay. So this topic, it's very profound, right? You can watch 100 hours of lectures on Vedanta, and by Vedanta I mean the particular school of thought that encompasses the knowledge and or jnana and philosophical thought found in the Vedas. You can watch hundreds of hours of that, and it still won't be enough. You can do hundreds of lifetimes of that, and it still won't be enough. And then the intersection with that is music. You can listen to 1,000 hours of kacheris. You can sing for your whole life since you're a baby, and one more lifetime on top of that still won't be enough. So combining both of these topics and presenting in a limited amount of time is impossible to cover properly everything, but I've tried my utmost best, and I've tried to revise it as much as possible to connect to a wider audience, and I hope that this specific topic brings up a lot of discussions about this topic as much as possible, because I think not enough people talk about this specific intersection between music and philosophy. So first, I just want to ask, I want to get a feel for people, right? So how many people here sing or do music, play any instruments in Indian classical? You can raise your hands, please. Look, it's a good portion of the people, and I'm pretty sure everybody here is a listener as well. So I just want to ask, show of hands, how many people consider, when they learn a composition, how many people consider the raga bhava, the expression of the swaras and the sangadis and the sancharis, how many people consider that to be the most important part of learning a kriti? Right? Okay, I'm also raising my hand here, right? And then how many people believe that the lyrical expression, the sahitya bhava, is the most important? Okay, also raising my hand. It really depends on where I am that I believe when it's important. And I see a lot of people raise their hands twice because there's an understanding that both of these are very important. Nadam just gave a very, very good presentation on Neraval. And Neraval is very, very much connected to Sahitya Bhava and expressing the intersection between Swaram and Sahityam and making that sound beautiful. So what does this have to do with Vedanta, right? So Vedanta is considered, it's a compound word, Veda and Anta. So Anta means conclusion, right, or Anta. So it's the conclusion of the Vedas, right? And that can mean the end of it, but it can also mean the full compounding of all the Vedic knowledge, right? And usually it refers to a part of the Veda called the Upanishads, and then the knowledge gained from that, which is an even more condensed form of Vedic knowledge. So this influences Carnatic music in a few ways, and I didn't know how to really express the way that this connection was until somehow yesterday I had the good fortune to be in Shri Priya Auntie's students at Engagement, and she said something very profound. Arts are the fifth Veda, right? So from what I've heard from Auntie, which I think was very, very, she can say it much better than I can. So the gods have given us Vedas, right, as a way to reach enlightenment, which is considered philosophically to be the highest form of knowledge, and the way to eternal salvation, bliss, happiness, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, humanity can't understand it. It's so profound, it's just impossible to really digest everything. So what do? They're thinking, and then they give the Natya Shastra, which is a treatise on all these performing arts, dance, drama, music. People usually refer to it in the context of dance, but it really does have a lot of stuff that's both intersectional between all of these disciplines, for example, like bhava and rasa, and also it does talk about many terminologies that are in Carnatic music and Hindustani music today, and that's one of the commonalities in these things. And the discipline that it takes to learn one of these art forms is equivalent to studying a Veda. A Veda takes years and years and years of memorization, practice, daily chanting and reciting, daily contemplation. Doesn't that sound familiar, right? That sounds like every day, you do your daily practice, you sit down at the Shruti box, and you just try your best to get better and better, right? So this is why it's known as the fifth Veda. And these are the two scriptures that many people trace back to the ancient roots of Carnatic and Hindustani music. Carnatic and Hindustani music, many people know, like, started at the same point and then diverged, with Hindustani music taking more of a route into Manodharma Sangeetam, right? And a lot more freedom and expression. And then Carnatic music sticking more into Sahitya Bhava and expression of, and lyrical expression, especially with the type of compositions in each of them. So in this one, they say Sama Veda, which is the one of the four Vedas, the one that if you listen to it, if you have listened to any Sama Veda, it has like a lot of musical feeling to it, right? Because they don't just chant, like, I'll say Om Bhurbhuvasvaha Tatsaviturvarenyam, like this is one just way to say Om Bhurbhuvasvaha. But then in Samaveda, Om Bhurbhuvasvaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo. So they'll say it like that, right? So it's very musical innately, and this is one of the roots of Carnatic music. A more recent root is in Natya Shastra, right? And these are both, the reason that I've given a timeline for this is because Samaveda and all Vedas were spoken traditions, and then they're codified later on, and this is the date that I'm giving for that, or it's very disputed, right? And same thing for Natya Shastra. These are treatises that are very hard to really date properly. And I want to explain that bhakti, right? The conception of bhakti and devotion to God that's prominent in all religions, or almost all religions, is very, very intimately connected to music. These three are like some, just for example, right? Some three spiritual masters from all over India, right? So we have Paramahamsa Sri Ramakrishna. He would sing all the time with his devotees, right? And his disciples. And that was his way of teaching them, in addition to just giving a lecture. And then Saint Mirabai, she expressed her love for Sri Krishna with all of her songs. And now all those hundreds and hundreds of songs are available for us to experience that same devotion. And by the way, Ramakrishna sang songs, he had a disciple that composed songs, but a lot of the Chandidas in West Bengal, he used for Kali Amma, right? The goddess, he composed a lot of them, he sang a lot of his songs. And then we have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and you can see this one, I think the most obvious, the influence of this version of singing. This is Kirtan, right? So Kirtan, Bhajan, we can call them around the same thing. There's some distinction there, but that devotional singing that he brought and he made very prominent, you can see that even today. His teachings are followed especially by ISKCON, which is a very, very big sect of Hinduism today. But yeah, I want to first just delve very briefly into what Advaita, Dvaita, and Vishishtadvaita are. So in Hindu philosophy and Vedanta, there are three schools of thought, or three main schools of thought. Inside these schools, there's sub-schools, and there's different ways of thinking about each of these things, but there's three main principles, right? So this is a line that many people say comes from the, like, Tulsidas Ramayana Ramacharitra Mahamanasa, but it's also disputed if it's coming from there. I read that and I don't remember seeing this there, but that also could be my mistake. So I'm not sure where this comes from, but many people know this conversation. So Rama asks Hanuman, hey, who am I? Like, who am I? Who am I as Rama, right, to you? And he says, when I identify myself with my body, I'm your servant. When I identify myself with my individual soul, that's called Jiva, or Jivatma, then I'm a part of you. When I identify myself with the spirit, Atma, the all-pervading spirit of the universe, I am you yourself. So I'll go in order here. When I identify myself with my body as my individual persona, this is Dvaita. Now, Dvaita doesn't just mean like, oh, my body is all I am. There's still the in all these philosophies, the cycle of rebirth, right? Karma, dharma, this all exists. The still flowing nature of Hinduism and Eastern religion is still existing there. But it's still in Dvaita, Vedanta, the philosophy is essentially that, and I hope I'm explaining this properly, that there are two distinct realities. And there's a tenet called 5 differences, but I can't get into that now. But there's 2 distinct realities. There's Parabrahma, or Mahavishnu, right? And then there's us, right? Everybody here, sitting here. And everything around us, the world around us. And we are dependent on Mahavishnu for our existence, but we are not Mahavishnu, right? It goes one way, right? because the purity of Mahavishnu and Paramatma is greater than that of us, right? But we can still attain like salvation through like the means of devotion, right? And then the next one, and this is the youngest of the three philosophies, right? This is Madhvacharya. He's the biggest proponent of this. This is around 760 years ago. Again, all these birth dates and things are very disputed, but this is the average that I took, around 760, early average. And then the next one is when I identify myself with the individual soul. This is Jiva. That is from Ramanujacharya, who many people know. He's a very, very popular proponent of Vishishtadvaita. And Vishishtadvaita is kind of formed as a rebuttal to Advaita and then took its much larger than life shape. And it's essentially that Vishishtadvaita is a compound word. Vishishta, Advaita, right? Vishishta means distinction, right? And Advaita means non-dualism. So this is qualified or distincted non-dualism, right? So it's saying that Paramatma and Jivatma, they're the same thing, but at the same time, there's a distinction to be made, right? Paramatma is up here, we're over here, yes, we're one and the same. It's like the sea, in the sea we have waves, right? And when we look at it, we'll see, oh, look at the waves flowing. In the end, it's still part of the sea overall, but we have to realize that the waves are still there. On contrast, we have the last one. I identify myself with the Atma, I am you yourself. This is completely different. The guy comes across the sea, and then he's like, oh wow, I don't see any waves, it's just the sea, right? Everything is the same. There's nothing but God, and everything is God. And the distinctions that we see is Maya, and Maya is one of the most debated principles, but I'll get to that later when we look at our compositions. So I want to say like that Carnatic music and Hindustani music really flourished and kind of got its start with the Bhakti movement. We know that Carnatic music, the father of Carnatic music is Shri Purandardasa. But even before that, there are many poets and many people who are floating around and creating poems and putting them to folk tunes. The music has been with us since the dawn of man, right? So, but our classical music that we perform nowadays had its starts with Purandardasa. But the Bhakti movement essentially started in Tamil Nadu with the Arvars and Nayanmars. Their Arvars are devotees of Vishnu and Nayanmars are devotees of Shiva. And and there are many of them. There's 64 Nayanmars, correct me if I'm wrong, and there's 12 Arvas. And each of them, they had their own distinct style of poetry, and they would praise their Ishtadevata, their chosen God, right? I want to start by talking about Andal, right? She's, if you go to SV Temple down here, right, you'll see her statue, Goda Devi, right? So her story, I'm pretty sure most people are very familiar about, but she's one of the Arvars, right? And she wrote a very famous set of poems called Tirupavai, which has been set to tune, right, in the last 50 to 100 years, in that time set to Carnatic tune. And most famously, my favorite recording of this is by KVN set, so it's very, very beautiful. But I want to specifically talk about this pasuram, right, that will explain a little bit about how philosophy has made its way into music. So I'm just going to read the English, right, because my reading in Tamil is very slow. So, she who has wide eyes darkened by coal, right? I'm just going to dissect this line by line. So they say darkened by coal, but the thing is, we're talking about Napinne, who's Krishna's wife, right? And Krishna is said to be Krishna because he's black in color, right? So she who's seeing him all the time, her eyes are darkened because of that, because her eyes are always laying on him, right? Won't you allow him to wake up for even a short time? Can't you be apart from him for just a moment? This isn't right, this is in your nature. Now, I can't credit this translation because this is like a medley of a bunch of different translations that I had to put together because I don't think any of them really got the Tamil. Even the original Tamil, it's very, very hard to dissect that, right? And also this is Shuddha Tamil, that's not my strong suit, yeah. But essentially, what Andal is referencing here is that she's jealous of Lakshmi, right? Lakshmi's not letting her and her friends, right, see Krishna. She's not letting her see who she loves, right? And she's like expressing her jealousy, right? This is one of those like, and bringing out that jealousy feeling in both the reader / listener and in the person who's reciting it, right? So this seems just like that, but there's a deeper meaning to this. Now there's so many ways that you can dissect this, but the way that I choose to dissect this has to do very specifically with the concept of Maya, right? So Maya is illusion, and it's very heavily debated upon what it is, what its role is, in all these three schools of Vedanta. They have so many arguments about it. You can see all these different texts. They just, oh wow, you can dive into it for years. But one of the more popular interpretations about the role of Maya in the universe is that the universe's female and male energy is called Prakriti and Purusha, respectively, right? And Prakriti we can consider Devi, Purusha we can consider like Paramatma, Deva, whatever you want to say, right? But Prakriti is creation, right? Purusha is energy, and they both intertwine to make the reality that we're experiencing now. And this is the general thing. It's very complicated to explain and understand, but I hope that that makes sense. But essentially, what Andal is referencing here is Devi, who's Lakshmi, is blocking Mahavishnu from seeing us, right? And from us from seeing Mahavishnu, right? And this is a very interesting way of saying things, right? Because in the end, it says, this isn't right, this isn't your nature. Because in every text, they describe Lakshmi or any Devi as very compassionate. But in this case, she's like, no, you can't see her, right? But in this case, she's referencing the belief that you can only see Purusha, you can only gain enlightenment if Prakriti, if Devi has enough compassion and has enough goodwill and you have enough good karma to let Devi open up the mist of Maya and see Purusha and see and gain enlightenment, right? So you would say like, wow, this is how do you gain all of this from that, right? You have to think very, very deeply and to see even more than this. But this is the first thing that came to mind when I read this, right? But there's so many more interpretations about this, just this one line. And think, Andal has written so much poetry, all the Arvats, all the Nayanmars, they've written so much poetry, and this is just one piece of that puzzle, right? So we want to see that these lyrics, right, in something as common as a Tirupavai that people sing just in the mornings, there's so much deep meaning in it, and this is common throughout almost all Carnatic compositions. So I want to move on to something very, very familiar to most of us. Okay, familiar to most of us. First is Innudaya Bharade by Sri Purandaradasa. And basically in this one, he references two things. Purandaradasa was a very big follower of Dvaita philosophy. And in Dvaita philosophy, we've already gone over that. It's about personal God. Your relationship to God personally is a very big component of that. And we can tell through all of the bhakti, like drenched compositions that he wrote, this is one of the most famous ones. And so he says, I have offered all the fruits of the actions done by mind, speech, and body. What do I do? My soul belongs to you. Please give me compassion. Or like, why are you withholding your compassion from me? Innudaya Bharade Dasana Mele. So he's referencing this, but he's referencing this Dvaita Vedanta of being dependent on God for salvation. But he also references another proponent of Vedanta called one of the three yogas, Karma Yoga. Yogas are ways in which you can attain enlightenment, right? Karma Yoga is dedicating your actions towards your deity or towards divinity for the sake of enlightenment, right? But you're letting go of all the fruits of your actions. And in this one, there's like a famous Bhagavad Gita verse. It's in RRR, the movie, just if anybody remembers that too. Karmanyevadikaraste mapaleshu gadachana ma karmapale heturbuhu mate sangosva karmani. Forget the fruit of your actions, do the action for the thing itself. That's what Purandaradasa is talking about in this composition. But if you just listen to it without thinking about the lyrics, you wouldn't understand this. And then next, I want to talk about three compositions of Tyagaraja. So Tyagaraja is obviously one of the most popular Carnatic composers, one of my favorites. My favorite is Purandaradasa actually, but Tyagaraja is second in my heart. But this is a composition called Kanna Tandri Nape. This is one of my favorite lines specifically because it has a cool wordplay in the Anupallavi. It's like, Ninnu seyu panulone dugakave renale da nuchu ve marulagove renale da nuchu ve marulagove. And then it goes onwards, and then Kanna Tandri Nape. But yeah. And then Vadaleleni Dairya Shaligatani Madana Kodi Rupa Tyagaraja Noda Kanatan Rinabe. So it's a very, very nice song. It's one of my favorites. But it's very complicated to explain this one because the meaning is very contested. You know, you'll look up different translations just all over the place. But the Anupallavi's meaning is other than performing today the same jobs I did yesterday, I'm not thinking anything else. So when I was reading this, I felt like I was going in circles, right? And then ironically, Tyagaraja is also talking about going in circles. He says every day we do the same thing over and over again. Or even if we're doing different things every day, spiritually we're not going anywhere because we're thinking of the fruits of our actions. He's referencing Karma Yoga here. And then he says, I'm not such a brave person who could not leave you, Lord of the universe. Like he says, Madanakoti Rupa, that's like the beautiful Rama, right? So he's saying, I'm not brave enough to not leave you, right? So he's saying, he's giving this contrast to a lot of different compositions where they say like, oh, I have so much love and bhakti for you. He's admitting that as humans, we have human nature. We are subject to Maya and all these different interpretations of Maya and these paths. And that we are dependent on God, yet also at the same time our nature prohibits us from being completely dependent, right? At least mentally, even though we may truly be. So he's really kind of digging into what seems to be Dvaita philosophy here, talking about dependence. I need you. Please, like, show me compassion. And this is what he does with a lot of compositions. Nagumu Ganaleni, Ardamodi Galade, like all these very famous compositions, especially the very heart-pinching ones, he does those ones. Next one, you would think that he was Dvaita philosophy, but then he goes on to Advaita for the next one, right? So Paramatmudu Velige, everybody knows this one. The second line in the Charanam, so Paramatmudu Velige is basically means like the Pallavi, Paramatmudu Velige Mochata Vaga Telusukore. So in that one he's saying, no, undoubtedly the grandeur with which the Supreme Lord radiates. So he's just praising, right? But in the meat of the song is in the Anupallavi and Charanam, where he says, Hariyata Harudata, Hariyata Harudata, Hariyata Harudata, Surulada Narulata, Agilanda Kodulata, Andari Lovaramat. We sing all of these things. Shiva, Vishnu, which there's so many arguments about who is better in the world, right? But he's saying Shiva, Vishnu, the Devas, right? Celestials meaning like this Navagrahas, right? Men, us, right? And millions of different universes, right? Because Hinduism also somehow deals with the multiverse concept. All of these, they're just the same, right? It's all engulfed in his radiance. It's all him. And he's very interestingly, he's paralleling something in something in Rig Veda called Purusha Shukta, which says that, oh, this is the world. And it's called Purusha has 1,000 eyes. And the Purusha's modern conception is Vishnu, right? 1,000 eyes, 1,000 feet. He engulfs the whole universe from all sides. And even more than that, by 10 inches, right? So he's saying such a complex thing that has gone through so many different commentaries by so many different sages, and he's bringing it to us in a very popular song. I've heard Paramatmudu Velige performed in concerts so many times. I've performed this once before. This is a very, very common song, and he's expressing these ancient ideas. But he never gives us an answer, right? Which one is better, right? Dvaita, Advaita, until he gives us the song Dvaita Musukama, Advaita Musukama. And this one, the singing is very important. Dvaita Musukama, Advaita Musukama, Dvaita Musukama, Advaita Musukama. So does dualism lead to salvation or does non-dualism lead to salvation? He asks this question, but the thing about this is it's there in the entire composition. He just ends up praising God, right? He doesn't give any answer. He just talks about it. He's like, God, please tell me the answer. He's just asking a question. And then this also leads into the way that this verse is sung, right? Advaita has a prefix, right? Dvaita is dual. Is not, right? So when we Sukama Dvaita, so we're going back to this, they're blending together, right? They seem like it's almost the same by the end of it. Which one is Advaita, which one is Dvaita? It seems like it's the same. And this is the entire Pallavi, is just these 4 words. And so he's saying another ancient philosophical tenet, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, which is the truth is one, but the wise call it by many names. This is a very profound concept to get. There have been many fights in history about like various religions and stuff, and which one is right, which one is better. But it's, in the end, it all leads to the same path. In Western philosophy, if I'm correct, the term, it's mostly refers to Christianity, but it can be used for all world religions, ecumenicalism, right? So that's a modern terminology. This is like very ancient. And he's saying this, even in the style of singing, he expresses it. This is Sahitya Baba in one of its best forms. So next, I'm not gonna do any composition for this. I'm about to end soon, right? But I want to talk about the poet Bharatiyar, right? So I'm a Tamil person, so I've grown up reading his poems, and many people have heard his very famous song, ஆசை முகம் மறந்து போச்சே இதை யாரிடம் சொல்வேன் அடித்தோ ஆழி, and வெள்ளை தாமரை பூவில் இருத்தாய். Like these songs that are so close to like Tamil peoples and people all over the Carnatic sphere's heart, they all listen to these things. But Bharatiyar lived in a modern world where they were being educated by many different systems, right? Both English and Indian systems. And his father himself wanted him to become an engineer, so he made him go to like school, Western schooling, right? And even so, he also was a very progressive figure, right? Who tried to make as many social changes as possible, especially in like casteism, sexism, like all these things, and then also revolution. He encompassed so many things. And in all of those things, one of his biggest tenets was not to let go of ancient Indian philosophy. You'd be surprised. He's a very progressive person. He's living in a modern world, a globalized world, but yet he's referencing ancient Indian scriptures, right? Ancient Indian philosophy. It's profound, right? That to go forward, he went backwards, right? So I think that's a very profound thing. And he was also bringing back he was also part of a group of people bringing back a revitalization of Indian spiritualism in British India. One of the other people being like Rabindranath Tagore, everybody knows him. He has, his Geetanjali is very famous, right? He also did so much music. But this is art, history, revolution, these things all go in tandem. And for all of these composers, it was always this spirituality or the feeling that they had behind the music, their personal philosophies that influenced them and that made all these compositions hit our hearts in a certain way. So why is this even relevant today, right? What does this have to do with anything? So currently we're in a time that many people in my life, teachers, anything, like aunties, uncles, they've all told me like, oh, the golden age of Carnatic music was Tyagaraja and Muthuswami Dikshithar, Shyama Sastri, or like the golden age of this modern Carnatic music was this many years ago, right? Now it's kind of taking a little bit of a dip, right? And it's being compared a lot of the time. I would like to compare it to the way that Western classical music is viewed in the Western world. Like some people say it's elitist, right? It's too hard to understand. It's not accessible, right? But that goes against what Carnatic music is for. The Natya Shastra, this performing arts, was given to make inaccessible ideas extremely accessible to the common man. Purandara Shri Tyagaraja Swami, they were all people who tried to make extremely profound ideas available to the people all around them by using vernacular language, right? Colloquial language, right? To the level that I've asked like, Kannada and the Telugu speakers today, and then some of them can like truly understand what they're saying even today. Of course, language has changed quite a lot. There's classical Telugu, classical Kannada, it's changed, but mostly you're able to figure it out if you know any Indian language. Translations are available to us, right? But we're having this like downtrend in popularity. So, and it feels like Carnatic music is being portrayed as elitist sometimes, right? But maybe, I think, this is my personal opinion, if we maybe look back into the past, into the spiritual roots, and the intentions behind the music that we're singing, and the intentions behind the music that we will eventually create, maybe compositions, manodharmam, the intentions, the personal philosophies, the love and the adoration, the devotion for anything in our life, not just God, that we put into our music, right? If we dig deeper into that, and then properly understand it and truly internalize it, just as much as we internalize like the Arohana Avarohanam of any song or any Avadi Samavadi Swaras, if we can do that, and this applies to all art forms, then maybe we can bring Carnatic music to even greater heights, especially our youth today. But yeah, so that's the end of my thing. So yeah, before I even begin questions, I just want to say, like, my appa is very big on philosophy. That was first introduced to me, and my amma took my attention away from that with Carnatic music. Today they're coming together. I just want to thank them, thank Saifa for encouraging the youth to do this, especially Madhu uncle, who encouraged me a lot to, take the opportunity when it's given. I'm very, very thankful to all of you, and all of my teachers, of course. They're the reason that I can even stand here and understand these things, like all the people in my life. So thank you very much. But any questions? Please give us any questions. And if you have any comments or corrections or anything that you'd like to say, please tell me. I would like the feedback and I'd like to discuss. So anybody?
Is it 63 9 marks or 62 marks?
I think it's 63. Sorry, I said 64, but yeah, I didn't write the numbers down.
Alright, good.
Yeah, I think it's 64.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
63.
Okay, 63. Yeah, sorry, I said that's. Yeah, so that's that.
Were you able to trace when you did the research? Were you able to trace? You started giving the timeline. You said it's a little goofy, right? Were you able to somewhere say which came first? Like did Dvaita come first, and then somebody called it Advaita just to protest and say, is that the reason they even named it Advaita?
Okay, so I'll give you the proper timeline. So
I think Advaita was first.
Advaita was first, but it's,
Advaita, Adi Shankara was first, then came Ramanujacharya,
And
then
then
Madhvacharya is the youngest.
yeah.
So
So
first Advaita, then Ramanujacharya.
oh wait, it's fine. Wait, no, but Auntie is correct. This is actually correct. So Shankaracharya is around 1,300 years ago. That's 700 Common Era, right? So that's around the time that the Bhakti movement is actually getting going. And it's around that time. Shankaracharya actually at the time he wasn't the main Advaitic person. Now everybody, when they talk about Advaita, it's synonymous with Shankaracharya. But during his life, he was actually not a very well-known figure, historically speaking. So it was him. But then his works got more and more popularized. And then rebuttals to that were written, I think it's 12 rebuttals, correct me if I'm wrong, by Ramanujacharya about the Advaita's the concept of Maya, and then that gave birth to Vishishtadvaita as a concept, which got developed by many, many different thinkers. And then so the difference between Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya, which is Vishishtadvaita and Dvaita, is around, I'd like to say, 300 years, 300 to 400 years. It depends on the estimate, right? But with that time, Vishishtadvaita and Advaita are closer together than Dvaita is. Dvaita is more influenced by the idea of a personal God in the Bhakti movement, right? And making religion and philosophy more accessible to people, right? Because to think about all these things and to pour through so many books, like pouring through lectures and books and hours of these things, a lifetime of work, versus being able to express your devotion directly, that's more of a modern concept. And it was made to make religion more accessible by Madhvacharya, which is what a lot of people follow Dvaita philosophy today. So yeah, there's that. Any more? Okay, yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. This is really nice.
Thank you.
Can you give us an idea of what your process of research was like when you were going through this? Like, how did you formulate the question? How did you come to these kind of different links that you found between different things? And what sorts of sources or authors were you consulting?
Okay, so basically with this type of thing, I've always been interested in both subjects, right? So I've thought about it a lot, and whenever I learn a composition, I look at the lyrics, right? So that's the motivation for this talk, right? For the process of coming up with the question, I knew that there's some link between these two things, right? And what's called, I was Wikipedia rabbit holing through these different composers, because my teacher told me that if you want to understand a composition and perform it properly, then you should look at the composer and understand their life history. So if you understand a life history of these composers, a lot of the time they'll talk about what happened in their lives, right? And they'll also explain what their proponents, what philosophies they're a proponent of, because in times like, these are all like poets, saints that we're talking about, these composers. So a lot of the time it'll detail those things. And then you can see somewhat, if you learn enough compositions from a certain composer or something, you can see a trend in what type of things they're talking about. If you read enough of those meanings and look those up enough, then you can see a trend. So I thought I want to talk about this trend in different composers and try to connect it back to the roots of this. And I knew that the Bhakti movement from prior research was one of the big jumping off points that's really sprouted Carnatic music, especially this old poet saint culture, right? But in the thing of research materials, so I consulted a few different things. So Ramakrishna mission, that's a certain, so Ramakrishna, actually, you know what, let's just go back to here. He's the black and white photo that I showed originally. He's a saint from back in, before Indian independence, like 100 plus years ago. Back when they first came up with Polaroid photos. But he has a very long lineage of monks and monk ashrams and stuff, and they're all over India. They have a lot of bookstores. So I had, and a lot of them are are free PDFs or online. So I consulted those. And then in that order of monks, there are many monks, especially New York Vedanta Society. There's a monk named Swami Sarvapriyananda, yeah. And he has so many interesting lectures, which are available on YouTube for free. Some of them are short, some of them are long. I learned about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from Sarvapriyananda ji, so, and he came here recently. So all of these things, I consulted those things, and then of course the general scripture itself, I went back and I looked at Purusha Shuktam, I went back and I looked at Bhagavad Gita for these things, and some commentary, especially by Adi Shankaracharya, for understanding and processing them. And then of course the life history that's either been published. My sources are detailed in a different document because they're very messy and I did not have time to format them, nor did I know how to format them. I didn't know how to figure out the publishing press for some of these things. I was like, I don't know. So I was kind of struggling with some of this, but other than that, yeah, it's like trying to source, yeah, this is hard, but this is the process that I took. I just went, I did my research, and then somehow the presentation came into a form from that. But yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Niyati. You said your father was the driving force behind Vedanta.
Yes.
Regardless of which philosophy we talk about, the common theme is Atma. And your mother was Carnatic music, which is Raga, which is what brings joy. So when you listen to music, it brings joy to our Atma. That's, I think, what is the essence of the music.
That's a good one.
Wonderful presentation, a lot of depth in the role of Vedanta in our music. We appreciate your research and sharing it with us. So if I would